for less. It's all in your head, how you think you manifest. So get ready to rise, cause we about to be the best. Gotta switch it up, gotta break the old habits. Get your mind right, turn your dreams into habits. No negative vibes, only positive thoughts.
What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It is your host, Devan Gonzalez, and today we have a special guest. We have Mark Delaney. He is the founder of the Purpose Mindset and the Purpose Mindset podcast. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come out. Today I know we had an episode on your podcast, last week, and I'm super excited to run it back because of the way you think and, what you're all about.
Well, I love it. I'm glad to be on here, and I love organic, honest conversations.
This is awesome. So let's dive right in. How did the podcast and how did your mastermind get started?
It was never a plan. It's something that grew out of our life. About 7 years ago, I was a teacher at a school, and I loved it. But at the same time, I felt like as a man, I was dying, and I was just slowly, I was only living for comfort and security, and that was it. And I had some comfort and I had some security, but I was also just like decaying on the inside. I wasn't really living. And finally, one day, after a couple of years of wrestling, I was reading a book, and the first line of the book said, "Stop living as if the goal of life is to arrive at death safely." I read that line again. Stop living as if the goal of life is to arrive at death safely. And I handed it to my wife next to me. She was on a treadmill with me, and I said, I'm leaving the school after this year. And from there was just a step that led to a step that led to a step that led to a step. And about 200 steps later, we have a program called the Purpose Mastermind, where we help people to know their purpose. So it just happened through our life. It was no end game we had in mind. We were just like farmers. We kept planting seeds and something came out of the dirt.
No, that's so cool. I mean, so you said you're a teacher. What did you teach? What grade?
I taught a lot of junior high. I also taught some high school. Mostly I taught Bible, which for me became how to teach people how to function in life as a human. That's where I think the core of what the Bible is. It's like a manual for like how to live and thrive as a human. So the longer I taught 14-year-olds, I was like, I think we're all a bunch of 14-year-olds. The longer I looked at myself and these students and my friends, I'm like, a human's a human. There's just not much difference between a 14-year-old. I'm almost 54. There's not that much of a difference. And so everything we learned and everything we taught 14-year-olds has really kind of crystallized into helping people be reminded of who they were made to be.
That's awesome. I mean, I helped, build a prep school, for basketball kids and stuff. And they're the 13, 14-year-old age range. So I definitely say that you must have, some level of patience, because I remember myself at 13, 14, and it could be, a wild bunch, regardless of whatever, subject you're teaching, right?
I don't think I have patience. I just think I care a lot.
Okay.
And I believed so much in how a human being can be helped. I think in a conversation, I think in a moment of time, I think someone's life can be changed forever by things that are said, one human to another. And so I think I just cared so much. Because last week I was at a school, we were talking about mental health, and I asked the students to write on a piece of paper, just finish this one sentence, my life feels. And so many of them, they wrote down words like empty, purposeless, I'm just existing. One kid said, my life is, I'm just in a video game, but I'm a non-character player, not even mattering. And the thing that compelled me with these, as I read these things from students, was this is how many adults feel.
Mm-hmm.
The way a student feels at age 16, they might feel the exact same way when they're 56. And that's daunting to me. But what is exciting to me is I really believe that in a couple of conversations, a 16-year-old can learn how to look differently at their life and forever be changed because of it. So I just cared a lot. I don't think I was patient.
No, I agree with what you're saying. And I think that's so amazing that you had that realization, especially when you're teaching, the kids, and now, when you're teaching, adults and anyone else. And I know there's another aspect that I want to dive into with you from our previous conversation, but it is so true, right? You have those lasting conversations that, leave an imprint on someone. That, I mean, I remember some of my teachers from, elementary school all the way up till, college, and the one conversation or the one piece of advice, it just sticks with you. And sometimes that's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
What you teach, the actual subject, it matters to a degree, but the impact that you can leave on someone else's life is endless, right? The value is endless, right? So, and then I want to dive into another aspect that, I know we've talked about before, but how did you get involved into the prison scene? Because I know you had a trip to, a prison, and, you spoke with some gentlemen there.
I have a couple laws that I live according to every day in my life. One of them is to trust the people under my nose. So when it comes to any kind of forward movement in life, I don't look for strangers. I look for the people in my life who I know, like, and trust. They know, like, and trust me. And the second law I live by is to take the next step. And usually the people in my life are connected to the next step in my life. So in short, someone asked me, will you come and share at this prison and just come tell stories and tell us what you do? And so I did. And the conversation, it was interesting. I when I talk, I usually always draw pictures and tell stories and draw pictures. And so I drew this picture on the whiteboard at this prison of what our life looks like, because basically the story of everyone's life is the same. We fill in the blanks differently, but our stories really aren't very different. And I drew this picture of how we become trapped as human beings. And then I get to the point where it's like, now let's talk about how we get to where we're not trapped anymore. Now I'm talking to guys in a prison. And when I got to that place in the story, the alarms went off and they went on lockdown. They all had to immediately leave the room. And the timing was impeccable because it was about to talk about how do you get untrapped? And the alarms went off and they yelled, they said, no, we can't stop here. And so as they're running out of the room, I yelled, I'll come back next week. And so now I've been there for a couple of years, ongoing, going through the Purpose Mastermind with these guys. So that's how it happened. I was asked to go, and so I went.
No, that's so awesome, man. When the alarms went off, it must have been like when you're watching a TV show and then it's like on the next episode or to be continued.
Yes.
And they're like, wait, that's the golden sauce.
Yep.
That's so awesome. I mean, honestly, when you were asked to do the prison, talk, what were you feeling initially? Right? Because I mean, I know your purpose and everything like that, but sometimes a situation, even though we know it's going to align with our purpose, can still be a little nerve-wracking, a little scary. And I mean, that's a completely different scene than your mastermind than teaching at a middle school, when you asked to speak at a prison. How are you feeling?
I don't get me wrong, as a human, I think it's probably true for most of us. I always have fear about the next step. Mm-hmm. The next step for me always involves fear, but I've learned that now that's my indicator. If there's anything I'm kind of afraid of doing, but it's a good thing to do, I know I should do it. Mm-hmm. Fear never stands behind me. Fear is always in front of me. So now I've realized that fear is the trail of breadcrumbs to the life I was made for. So I learned to follow fear. Now, sometimes I follow very slowly. But here's an example. The other day I went to the Y to go do spin class, which was, before I left, I probably told my wife, hey, wife, Adina, I'm going to go do the impossible. When I say do the impossible, she knows what I mean. She knows that I'm about to challenge myself to do something hard. So I said, Dina, I'm going to go do the impossible. So I go to the Y to do spin class, which I think is impossible because it's awful and the seats are small. And so I went in there. There was one man in there I did not know. The instructor wasn't there, and we looked at each other and we thought, well, maybe it's canceled today. And sure enough, it was canceled. And so this man looked at me and he said, well, I'm going to go upstairs and do Pilates. He said, do you want to come? And I said, no, but because you asked, I will. And honestly, because I didn't want to go, but this man invited me, I went. And so that's just kind of how I look at life. If there's something good to do, if fear is saying don't do it, I try to always do it.
No, that's awesome. And I want you to, if you could re-say that one aspect about the breadcrumbs real quick, like just say that one part one more time. I think that was so awesome.
Yeah, if I remember it, fear, I've learned that fear is the trail of breadcrumbs to the life I was made for.
That's right there. That's so awesome. And I mean, I was talking to someone, actually, funny enough, I was talking to someone this weekend, and I was talking to them about fear. And I said, what is fear? Right? Fear is the unknown, right? Because once it's unknown, you're not fearful of it, right? So then I was like, so like you're saying, it is the trail of breadcrumbs that can lead you to become the person that you're designed to become. But not everyone wants to follow that because they don't know what the next crumb's going to lead to, right? So I think that's so awesome that, you've already had that, realization within yourself, and you're willing to challenge yourself each day. And I mean, the growth that you've had from, middle school to now, you have a mastermind, a successful podcast, you're speaking in prisons, and, the intellectual, being that you are it's amazing, and that's why I was so thrilled to bring you on today to the Mindset Cafe, because the mindset you've developed, throughout your lifetime is definitely, apart from the normal.
I tell you, life is so simple. It's not complex. It's simple. The simplicity of stepping into one's fear. I don't believe that people, just my honest thoughts. I don't think people change because they read a book.
Mm-hmm.
I think they change if they read a book and that book inspired them to take a step into the unknown. I think
Yes.
The goal of this, people are not going to be changed by this conversation. If they listen to you and I talking, they are not going to be changed unless something we say inspires them to take a step into the unknown. That is the goal. I have a daughter, and I texted her recently. I said, are you reading any books these days? And she said, no. She said, I don't want to be book dumb. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I'm not going to read the next book until I have lived out what I learned in the last book. Because we can give ourselves a lot of credit as people for studying stuff at the expense of doing something with our own feet and our own hands and our own voice.
Yes. And I think I heard a quote from someone, there's an information overload and an implementation underload, right?
That's beautiful. It's perfect.
And I agree with everything you're saying. And
yeah,
I want to touch in on, what you were saying, how life is so simple, because we had a conversation before I was on your podcast and stuff. And you had told me, that you don't really do guests. And I was like, look, that's completely fine. Like, I still want to have you on mine. And then you asked me, what is your purpose? Right. And so I told you, before, I was like trying to think of like this profound answer, but then I was like, you know what, like all this just sounds so cheesy to me. Like, if he doesn't like, what my true life purpose is, then it is what it is. And then I told you, it's just to have a positive impact. And then your response to that was, it honestly like stunted me for like the rest of the day. I was like, man, when you said it, someone that can think like that simplistically, like that's what it's all about. And then you gave me the analogy, like if you could instill that in your daughter, that she just wants to do something to have a positive impact, like how would you feel if she told you that at 2, 5, as young as she is? And then it's like, wow, it is like I would be so proud.
Yeah, we are an information overload, and we give ourselves credit for seeing how much information we can consume. And it's not, it doesn't help. Like it's a bunch of brownie points we give ourselves. We need to be people of action. Mm-hmm. And we should read because we need information for our action. But if we do not take action, we will suffer all of the consequences of inaction, which it constipates our life. The complexities constipate us. The simplicity sets us free to go do and to live, and the results are wildly different.
No, I agree 100%. And I know your mastermind and your podcast for your mastermind and stuff, it's all about purpose, finding your purpose, right? And so how do you describe to someone like, or how do you help them start to find their purpose? Because then I'll tell you my way I've talked to people finding their why, or their why is their purpose in my words.
Yeah, well, in the mastermind we have 8 meetings. The first 3 meetings are all about removing the confusing mindsets that we have about purpose. Because we have these mindsets that we have had for maybe 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And the reason we can't find our purpose is because we've been looking in the wrong direction. We've been thinking about it the wrong way. And so the first 3 conversations, we talk about these 3 confusing mindsets and what we can think instead. And then we give people, later on in the mastermind, we give people this simple template of how to think and look at your purpose. And we give them an assignment of this one sentence they are to write. Because really purpose is very simple, and it must be simple. As soon as it becomes complex, it will never be known. It will never be known. But if it's simple, it can be powerful, and the person can begin to live their life differently.
No, I think that's so awesome. And so when you were so you've always had this like teacher, mentor, like leadership, part of you, because I mean, look at your life so far. It's some people are naturally gifted with that, ability to communicate with others, not to inspire others, but to communicate to others, mm-hmm. right? Because inspiration is very surface level, in my opinion. It's all about communication, right? And so when you were communicating with, the 13, 14-year-olds, what made you want to switch and, basically start the mastermind? When was that transition when you were like, I want to focus on helping people find their purpose?
It was never a plan. All I know is, Devan, I was descending as a man.
Okay.
I just felt it. There inside of me was a 1-inch lion in the corner of my heart with a blanket over it, but it was never needed because there was nothing in my life that required or would cause a roar, because I was living small. There was something so much bigger inside of me that wanted to live, but I wasn't letting it live. For 2 years before I left teaching, I was just wrestling with just my life and just feeling like there was so much more and something I had to give, but I was just playing it safe, and I was just looking for the next meal, just looking for comfort. And I think it was the last year of teaching, I went to the zoo on a field trip, and I was a chaperone, and I came across this enclosure that was about the size of a large living room with a tall ceiling. And there was a tree in the middle of it that spread out and filled most of the space. I didn't see anything, so I did what I hate to do, which is read. And I read the placard. It said there was some kind of eagle in this exhibit. And I was like, an eagle? Like, there's no room. Like, there's no room in this enclosure to fly. And sure enough, up on the branch, I see this eagle. And I feel like I wrestled in a conversation with this eagle for a long, long, long time. Because I was like looking at that eagle, and I'm like, okay, the eagle is safe. It's comfortable. No one's allowed to harm it. And they come and bring it food. And I'm like, that's my life. That eagle's living my life. But the eagle has this massive problem. In my mind, it's like, I wanted to ask the eagle, what is it like to never need to use those massive wings hanging from your shoulders. Because that was me. I had these wings. I had something in me. But I had positioned my life that I never would need to use my wings. All I know is I can't tell you there was a plan in place. I just knew that what was inside of me had to get out of the cage of the life I had created. And when I got out of the cage, I stopped living like I was an exhibit at the zoo. And instead, in the wild, like it set me free to look at life and just see who was I made to be and how can I be that person today? Who was I made to be? How can I be that person today? And the more that I just thought with that simplicity of thinking, I saw things to do. I saw how I could help. And then I just did it. When I was in that zoo, inside that exhibit, all I thought about was, do I look good enough today? Because someone might look by. They might come by and see me. Are my feathers straight? Do I look fat today? It's ridiculous. When you get in the wild, you can't think about what you look like. Like you have to live for so much bigger. So when I left that cage of my life, I left the cage of comfort. I certainly walked into fear. I certainly went into that unknown, but I could fly. And being able to fly is worth all the risk in the world. It's worth any level of fear. And it set me free. And the Purpose Mastermind is just something that came out of our life because I stopped living in a cage of fear and comfort.
No, that's so awesome. I love analogies, and the way you're able to paint that, I completely can see it and picture it. And I want to add to it. Sometimes in life, we're scared to, break out of that metaphorical cage that we put ourselves in. And, going back to the eagle, like maybe the eagle doesn't even know it has those wings because, let's say if it was born and raised in captivity, then again, it's never had to use them. So it doesn't know its potential. Sometimes breaking free or, as a bird the mother bird usually, kind of pushes them off the ledge. And then all of a sudden the wings come out because it's natural. All of a sudden you get to learn that you have these wings. You get to learn your purpose, when you get to expand outside that cage. But the hardest part is that fear of going into the unknown. So I love that analogy. And I think that's so awesome that you were able to spread your wings and really, fly and flourish, once you, set yourself free.
It is very hard to find your calling when you're living in a cage.
Mm-hmm.
Because our thinking is caged. Right now in my living room, I have a cage. I really do. Because I have a cage I bought recently. And when I go speak at men's events, I set up this cage and I teach from inside of this cage to portray the lives that we get stuck in. Inside of that cage, we can read lots of books. We can study a lot of things. We can do every personality profile out there in hopes of learning something. Inside of that cage, most of the information is useless. What matters is we have to have the guts to leave that cage of comfort and fear. And then all that information can actually be useful. But as long as I'm in the cage, I have stifled my life. I've constipated it. I hold my calling hostage. Many people are inside the cage. They're waiting to hear their calling, but their calling is waiting for them to leave the cage.
Yes. I think, and I want to see what you feel about this. I usually say that, reality is the perception of an individual, right? Your reality is your perception of life, right? So you can limit your reality and say that this is what you were made for and stuff like that, because that's your perception. That's either what you were taught. That's what you were led to believe. But someone else's reality and their perception of life, it could be completely different. So I try to, tell people that again, and what is perception? It's just a perspective on a situation. It's a perspective on your life. How are you viewing every interaction that you have with someone? If you're viewing it with a negative light, then the whole conversation could be negative, even though it wasn't. So how do you feel with, reality and being a perception of the individual?
Oh, I completely agree. That is why this cage that I bought, it's a very heavy cage. It's hard to get to an event. I have to take the cover off my truck and haul this thing around, because the only goal I have in front of people is to change their perspective. So that's why the visual is so important. I might say, a couple thousand words, but this cage is speaking the entire time. It's the cage. And the whole point is to help people have this mindset shift that brings this revelation. On the back of the book I wrote, I have a friend draw this picture for me. This book's called One Step to Freedom. And there's a man in a prison cell, and this big box in the picture is his problem. And he can't get the problem to fit through the prison bars. And this is what we do with our problems in life. We have these problems and we're like, I want to get rid of this. I want to get rid of this. I want to get rid of this. And we can't. We don't see the invisible prison bars. So we are imprisoned not by our problem. We are imprisoned by how we think about our problem. And this was the story of my life for so long. I thought I had to fix myself in order to go live the life I was made for. And so I worked hard to either hide or fix my problem in the prison. But the whole time, the prison door was not locked. I didn't have to fix my problem. I needed to leave the prison. And in doing so, it caused me to leave my problem. So it was never the problem. It was my response to the problem. So in long answer about perspective, yes, this is what's so exciting about that reality, is people's lives can change in a moment when they think about it differently. And that is good news for everybody, because everyone has probably 4 or 5 realities in their life that if they want to, they can focus on it really hard. And they can focus on it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Or they can have this revelation of, oh, I have this problem, but what if I have a purpose that's 10 times bigger than my problem? And I can spend my life building my purpose while I face my problem, instead of holding my life hostage, trying to fix my problem first.
Yes, that is awesome. And I think sometimes even when you look at your purpose and you really try to align with your purpose, sometimes the solutions to your problems are within finding your purpose, right? Because then you start to look at life differently. And, when, again, going back to our previous conversation, you asked me, or we talked about my story, and then it's like everything you've done was just it fit. If it fit with your purpose, then you did it. And I was like, I never really thought about it, but yeah, my purpose.
Devan, sorry to interrupt. Most people do the opposite. Everything they do fits within the context of them trying to fix their problem.
Right.
It's a complete opposite way of looking at life.
Exactly. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you. And this conversation is so awesome, because not many people have that perspective or that perception of life. It's like, if you, again, find your purpose, and it doesn't need to be anything crazy and super. Well, I like to say is, don't niche down your purpose, right? Like, keep it a little more broad, simplistic, as you said. And then when things come up in life, if it fits your purpose, then you do it. Yeah. Right. And believe me, I mean, I had no idea what a prep school even was. I didn't even heard of a prep school. Yeah. And, when I got asked to do it, I was like, what's the outcome? He said it was going to help these kids. I was like, okay, well then let's do it.
It's beautiful.
So I think that's so awesome. And what's so amazing about your story too is that you had a steady career, right? You had a career that, a lot of kids coming out of college and stuff are aiming to get, yet you still at one point were like, this is not fulfilling me enough. Like, this is not my true purpose. That there's more, I can do more. And you made a transition in, like, how long have you been doing the podcast, the mastermind, and everything like that?
About 5 years. I left teaching 7 years ago, and
Okay.
it was slowly built. And so it's been about 5 years.
Okay. So you're teaching roughly 15, 20 years.
Yeah. I had taught about 20 years.
See it? I mean, and that's a full career length for people. And yet that was your transition point, which shows you that, at any point in life, you can pivot, you can transition and fulfill your life. You don't have to be stuck on the railroad tracks of the journey you think you have to be on.
Yeah.
So what is that one, before I ask the next question, what would be that one piece of advice that you gave those kids, when you saw the answers they were giving, right? Because when you were saying that, I thought about myself at 13, 14. And if you would have asked me that question, I don't think I would have answered it in a way that would have aligned with what you were trying to get. I think I would have answered it in a way, what is my career? What am I going to be?
So these students who have these feelings of, I'm just existing, I'm useless. I told them, I said, there was a room of about 100 kids, and I said, listen, I'm going to choose one person in this room, and I'm going to tell you what your biggest problem is. And I built it up like it was a magic act or something. And I said, does anybody want to volunteer? And some kid, I think his name was Fabian, volunteered. And I said, Fabian, I know what your biggest problem is. And I built it up. I said, does anybody want to know what Fabian's biggest problem is? Fabian, do you want me to tell everyone in this room what your biggest problem is? And when he agrees yes, I tell him, Fabian, this is true of everyone in the room. Fabian, your biggest problem is the problem that you hide. And this is true of all people. We were talking about mental health, and when it comes to mental health, we understand what hunger is.
Mm-hmm.
Hunger is a friend that is awkwardly telling us to eat more. We understand thirst. Thirst is a friend that is awkwardly telling us, get something to drink so you don't die. Depression is a friend that is awkwardly telling us to live more, love more, and play more. And so when these students, when they shared their thoughts about how they're feeling about life, the first thing we talked about is just the hiding of your problem. Just don't hide it. And then we said, I once again, I pulled out a student and I said, I want to say something to you. I said, I know what's wrong with you. Can I tell you what's wrong with you? And I would say this to anybody, Devan. Nothing is wrong with you. Human beings, the problem with us is before we ever know what our cape of calling is, we all find our kryptonite, our weakness, and we spend a lifetime thinking there's something wrong with me and I have to fix me. But if people know their purpose, if they know the calling they have, instead they can spend their life pursuing who they are made to be, instead of spending their life thinking, I need to fix me.
Yes. That's so awesome. And and again, it's so simplistic, but at the same time, it's so deep. And that's what's so awesome about this conversation. I actually heard this analogy, or it's a twist on a proverb, I believe. But if let's say a water bottle, right? A water bottle we can sold at the grocery store for $1, right? That same exact water bottle is sold at the movie theaters for about $3, $4. That same exact water bottle sold on a airplane about $7, right? So it's not that you aren't worth your value. Sometimes your purpose, you as an individual, just aren't in the right setting And that's where you just have to realign and reposition yourself and find where you need to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's so awesome. So before we wrap up and stuff, I like to ask one question, right? And I don't like to give this question. You're probably going to answer it, a lot better than, or a lot faster than people usually do, because of your background and stuff. But I don't like to give this question ahead of time, because then you get disgenuine answers. And this is not a tombstone. This is a wall that it just says, Mark Delaney, this is your legacy wall. What is that last, message, lesson that you would leave for everyone? Hypothetically speaking, everything else you've created has been erased. You only have to leave this one last message or lesson.
Can I tell a story?
Yep.
Most of my life, my problem was that I was hiding my problem. And in the hiding of my problem, I was hiding my gift. I finally unveiled myself in a conversation with a man. My whole life, all I've wanted to do is help people. When I was a little boy, I used to love to make cookies for people because it helped them. As I got older, the level of help I wanted to give to people changed. But at the core, all I want to do is make cookies for people. I finally unveiled myself, the real me, with a man named Alan. For the first time, I uncovered my problem, which for me was weight and food. And I know that some people look at that and think it's not that big of a deal. Can I tell you something, Devan?
Yep.
Being locked in a prison is being locked in a prison. It doesn't matter what you got there. The level of suck is the same. There's no brownie points given for having a different kind of problem. Like if you're living your life in a prison, you're living your life in a prison.
Yep.
And I felt like most of my life, I was a good man, but I was teaching people through the bars of my life. They were visiting at my visiting hours at my prison. When Alan was talking to me, I remember just saying, Alan, I feel like I'm going to die a young man. And my funeral is going to be a bunch of people looking at me in this casket, thinking, Mark was a good guy. If he could have stopped eating biscuits, he could still be alive doing something. And I said, Alan, I feel like I'm going to die a young man because of food. And my life will have never shown my own kids what freedom looks like. The rest of my life, I will declare to people that they can be free and live out their purpose. And that's all that matters. It does not matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what's been done to you. It does not matter your past. It does not matter your current problem. You can be free and pursue your purpose. That is my message. And that is the only message I will declare with the rest of my life.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on today. Where can people connect with you and learn more about the Purpose Mastermind and everything like that?
Yeah, my website is markdelaney.com. The podcast is the Purpose Mastermind Podcast. And I'm also just going to give a phone number right now. Okay. Because there might be someone listening to this and you feel like you've been living your life inside of a cage and your life is made to make a difference. And you're tired of the cage. And if you need my help, you know how to reach Devan, but if for some reason my story, I'm the guy that you need to get out of your cage, reach out to this number, 918-401-9608.
That's awesome. And then if you wanted to send me that over as well, I'll go ahead and put that in the show notes for you guys if you're listening. If you guys are listening, I want you guys to make sure you guys share this with a friend. I know this episode was filled with a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom. And please do not hesitate to send this to an individual that you think is not fulfilling their purpose or is holding themselves back right? That's what this show is about. That's what Mark and I are both about. So Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to hop on today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No negative vibes, only positive thoughts. Cause in the game of life, mindset causes stress. Got my mind on the prize, I can't be distracted. I stay on my grind, no time to be slacking. I hustle hard, I go against the current. Cause I know my mind is rich to be collected.
Awesome.
We did it.
We did it.